Can Thomas Frank's Tottenham stop Man City, who were absolutely phenomenal against Wolves last weekend? In short, I think it is possible, but in this video, we're going to delve deep into how City set up versus Wolves, how Spurs are going to change versus their game versus Burnley, and where Tottenham need to focus on the pitch to be able to stop Man City on Saturday. Straight away, we're going to look at how Man City set up versus Wolves and how they were able to dominate them and beat them 4-0. As you can see, this is sort of how both teams were set up on the day. On paper, it's a 4-3-3 for Man City, and we all know from watching the games or the highlights, if you watched it, the man of the match, Reinders, was absolutely phenomenal. What a debut. But I will also say that Nico Gonzalez actually had a very good game as a number 6, which isn't really his actual position. Also, another player that I thought was phenomenal was Oscar Bob. I think it's a shame he missed a lot of last season through his injury, but he is going to be some player. And also want to shout out to Rico Lewis as well. I thought he had a great game. So this is how they set up on paper, but what was it going forward? Well, they deployed a 2-3-5 attacking structure. So obviously, when going forward, you had Haaland up in the middle, kind of had your 2 8s alongside him. Oscar Bob and Doku were holding a lot of the width. Now in midfield, you basically had Gonzalez as the base, and Ait-Nouri and Lewis actually came in as sort of inverted fullbacks, similar to what we kind of saw under Ange with the likes of Porro and Udogie and Spence. They were inverted fullbacks as well, and they were holding up in the midfield with Diaz and Stones. So this sort of, you can see the 2-3-5 structure is generally how they attacked. I mean, if you watch the game, Lewis, to be fair, was everywhere. Sometimes he held a bit of width and Oscar Bob drifted into the middle. Sometimes we actually saw in cases Rico Lewis came across and almost like dropped in this sort of position. In other cases, you had Rico Lewis kind of almost goes forward as the 8. That's how they got their goal when he assisted Haaland. You had Reinders did this beautiful dink ball. Where's the football on this thing? Reinders had the ball here. There's a lovely chip ball over to Lewis, who ran onto it and put it across goal for Haaland to tap in. So Rico Lewis was everywhere, but in general, that he inverted to create this 2-3-5 shape. That was a lot of central overload because obviously Wolves set up in a 3-4-3 formation. A lot of the midfield will find space because of the quality of Reinders on the ball, and even Gonzalez, to be fair. The thing with Reinders, and to be fair, Wolves were brave throughout the whole game, right? They were pressing hard. They were trying to get onto Reinders. They were trying to close him, so they didn't really have much space. The issue is, in tight spaces, Reinders was unbelievable. He was so good because the thing is he could go inside, he could go outside, he was able to dribble. I think it was going towards the goal. It didn't end up being a goal, but it was a great little move in this sort of position here where it looked like he was going inside. I can't remember who it was at the time. Was it João Gomez and Bellegarde or something like that? Or maybe Andre came across as well. There was a time where he had 2 Wolves players closing him down. He looked like he was going on the inside and he quickly shimmied away and was in a lot of space in this area here, to where he actually played a ball over the top into Haaland at the back post. Very dangerous opportunity. Just how Reinders can work in tight spaces, he was quality. And I think this is the problem that Wolves had in general throughout the match, is that there just wasn't enough in their midfield to be able to cover the likes of Bernardo Silva, Gonzalez, Reinders. Funny enough, Gonzalez actually had more dribbles than Doku during the game. Because a lot of the time what would happen, now I'll just use this example, I've only moved the attack for Wolves, just imagine the rest of them are sort of pressed up, because Wolves actually were being quite brave and pressing Man City. Nico Gonzalez had the ball in these sort of areas and he drove through midfield. So much of Man City's attack, despite Bob and Doku holding width, so much of their attack came from driving through the middle with their midfield. I think City's weakest player on the day was probably Doku. I think he was very, very, very isolated out on the left-hand side. Wasn't really involved in play as much. And in fact, most of the play was on the right-hand side with Rico Lewis, Bob, Reinders running into that space as well. They had a lot of joy on the right-hand side. Left side was completely left, sort of isolated, especially with the fact that Ait-Nouri was coming in centrally with Rico Lewis. And then when it came to the defensive side for City, when they had to counter-attack, they were sort of counter-attacking in a 4-1-4-1 shape. So Haaland would initiate the press, and then you had these 4 lined up here, Gonzalez sort of by himself in the middle, and then the back 4. That is sort of how City were defending for pretty much most of the game. And when it got to the sort of their area, they actually were quite outstretched. And this is why I think Tottenham can take a big advantage in this game. A lot of the times they would defend in this sort of way where Ait-Nouri, if say Menezzi or whoever it was had the ball out on the right hand side, a lot of the times Ait-Nouri would get dragged out into sort of his more natural left back positions to kind of put pressure on Menezzi. That left a bit of a gap. Gonzalez did fill in, so there was 4 of them in the box, but with how much ground that Reinders and Bernardo Silva had to cover for the whole match, there was a bit of space a lot of the times between the midfield and defence for City. And there were a few chances where Wolves could have gone ahead in the match, to be honest. It took, what was it, 32 minutes, 33 minutes for Man City to actually score. So there was quite a while in that first half where Wolves actually had quite a few chances. And I think that was probably Man City's biggest criticism, is their defensive structure, which I think they're still working on under Pep. Going forward, incredible, but this is why I think Spurs can take advantage. But like I said earlier, Reinders was just simply unbelievable. He's got an eye for goal. He's box crashing, box to box midfielder. He kind of ran the show a little bit. Like I said, was able to create left, create right, make runs into the box. In fact, on the left hand side is where he got his goal, where he made the run forward. I think it was Oscar Bob drove forward with the ball in this sort of area. Haaland kind of peeled off to the right hand side. This was a very quick counter-attack because they won the ball back in midfield. So a lot of Wolves were just committed forward because, like I said before, they were being brave. And the problem with this formation is as soon as they lost the ball in that midfield of the park, it was basically a 3-on-3 situation. But luckily, Reinders managed to find space here. Haaland made the run to the right-hand side. Bob played a ball through to Reinders, and it was a beautiful little finish on the left-hand side of the box. So he is a very, very dangerous player and an unbelievable debut from him. Someone that we're definitely going to have to watch out for in our match against him. But like I said as well, not to kid ourselves, Wolves actually had quite a few chances in this match. In fact, they only had one less shot on target with Man City. Man City had 4 shots on target, scored 4 goals. Wolves had 3 shots on target to 9 shots, which actually wasn't too bad considering it was, in theory, a dominant display from Man City. And like I was alluding to before, they exploited Man City's defence being stretched out to put crosses into the box to create some really, really dangerous chances. I'd like to think that Spurs, especially in the defensive structure and defence, have a little bit more physicality and a bit more quality about them. I'm hoping we don't concede the same sort of chances that Wolves did. But nonetheless, that brings us on to how I think Spurs are going to set up versus Man City. And to be honest, I think we're going to see pretty much the same team that we saw against PSG. This seems to be what Thomas Frank is going to do against much, much, much tougher opposition. This might happen in the Champions League as well if we're coming up against someone like a Real Madrid, a PSG, whoever it may be. I think I see us setting up in this 5-3-2. Vicario, Danzo, Romero, Van de Ven. Then you've got Porro and Spence because we pretty much don't have any other fullbacks available at the moment. Palhinha and Bentancur were rested against Burnley, I think with a view to play this match. So I think they will come back in and play that sort of double pivot in midfield with Sarr, who has just been absolutely phenomenal ahead of them. Kudus, and then I'm not so sure yet as to whether it's going to be Richarlison or Solanke. Obviously, Richarlison had a great match against Burnley. However, in the whole Eze saga, which I'm trying to get out of my mind, he was thrown in last minute in a deal. How that affects his mentality, because I would not be surprised if he's fuming, because I don't think he would have been made aware that he was part of a deal. For someone who thinks, oh, I've just scored 2 goals in my first game of the season, all of a sudden I'm being thrown in a deal to come out of the club and I want it. I don't know. I think there could be some sort of mentality issue there, and Solanke is slowly coming back to fitness as well. So there is a chance Solanke does start ahead of Richarlison, but based on form at the moment, I think Richarlison should be the one. But either way, it doesn't change the setup or the structure. I still think it's going to be this sort of 5-3-2 from Spurs, just like we saw against PSG. When it comes to defending, when obviously, because you know City are going to push with 5 at the top, if the ball is out wide, like we've seen in a lot of games so far against the likes of Bayern Munich and PSG and Arsenal, when Spurs come up against tough opposition, what will happen is I think we'll get a very, very defensive back line with Palhinha and Bentancur almost forming this so-called back 7 or a 6 maybe. You might have Bentancur slightly ahead with Sarr helping out. I think if City had the ball out, say Oscar Bob's got the ball out wide here, for example, obviously naturally Spencer's going to be out to him, I think Spurs will crowd the box, and I think that's something that Wolves didn't do enough. They set up in a back 3, but it was basically the 3 in their own box. I think they afforded too much space for Man City in their own box. Whereas I think Spurs and how Thomas Frank sets up, I think we're going to look to crowd that area to try and block any ball to Haaland, even if Reinders comes crashing in or Bernardo Silva on the edge of the area, whether it's Marmoush or Doku, whoever it is at the back post. I think we're going to look to keep a really sort of tight midfield, and then if we do win the ball, that's where I think we're going to get the quick breaks to Kudus out wide, or even Sarr gets a chance to break forward as well. I think this is how defensively we will look if Man City have the ball out wide in the areas, if it's Bob or Foden or whoever it is that's on the wings. Same on the left-hand side, if it's Marmoush, if it's Doku, whoever it is. If they have the ball out there, I do think we're going to see this extremely defensive line from Spurs. Now, where we saw that this was an issue against Bayern Munich, even against Burnley when we were defending, it's the edge of the area that's going to cause us issues. So again, let me paint you a scenario. The ball is out wide with Oscar Bob on this right-hand side. What we know from the way Spurs defend so far under Thomas Frank is obviously Spence will go out to Bob, who is a brilliant 1v1 defender, by the way. I think Spence is the man you're going to want to come up against someone like Oscar Bob, who's a brilliant dribbler, a fantastic footballer. Van der Ven, Bentancur, Romero. I think you're going to find that Romero and Danzo are going to share the duty of trying to bully Haaland a little bit, which is easier said than done. Bullying Haaland is not a term I'm using lightly there. I think they're going to try their best, which is why we're going to go for dual winners in this team. Physicality. I mean, we've got a lot of players in this lineup above 6 foot. Bless Porro and Kudus. I think they're pretty much the only ones, to be honest with you. But I think that's why we're going to go for a very physical team, because to try and stop Haaland is no easy feat, believe me. But we saw against Arsenal in pre-season, the moment Gyökeres came on for Arsenal, Danzo stuck to Gyökeres like glue. Pretend Haaland is Gyökeres in this situation. Danzo stuck to Gyökeres like glue. When the ball was out wide, instantly Danzo was on to Gyökeres. He's giving him a nudge. He's sort of letting him know he's there. I would not be surprised if Danzo takes the brunt of trying to off-put Haaland as much as you possibly can. There's always a lot of talks about Romero being the so-called rash one and the one that's going to be physical. And don't get me wrong, he still will be. He has done against Haaland in the past when we beat them at home, for example. It was Romero that was onto Haaland. But with the addition of Danzo and this back five shape, I would not be surprised if Danzo's physicality was used to sort of put off Haaland in this sort of scenario. But what I was saying to, and what it can be a bit of an issue for Spurs, is when we do defend in this really deep sort of defensive, and I'm talking like this is exactly where it is. If the ball's out wide, Oscar Bob here, Spencer's come here. A lot of the times, what we would see is against these really good teams, Bentancur comes really deep, Palhinha comes really deep. Let's just say Haaland's in the middle occupying the two centre-backs or midfielders, whoever's in there. Porro, again, is also going to be sort of in line worrying about the back post. The issue in this scenario is, and this has happened in multiple games, if you've seen my previous tactical videos, the midfielders are left with far too much space on the edge of the area. So if Oscar Bob finds a scenario where he is able to get past Spence, and let's say he gets into this sort of position, the danger for me is not Haaland in this scenario. The danger for me is Reinders and Bernardo Silva, or whoever it may be in attacking midfield. It could be Shirky later on in the match. There is a very easy cutback to go to Reinders or Silva or whoever it is to have a shot off in these quality players. That is where I think we need to be a little bit more switched on and recognise, trust Romero and Danzo to be able to handle Haaland, trust them enough, and have Palhinha and Bentancur step up a little bit to keep an eye on Silva and Reinders, if it's those two that are going to be. I think this is how we're going to have to defend if the ball is out wide to someone like Oscar Bob, equally the same on the left-hand side. Too many times, Bentancur's too deep, Palhinha's too deep. You've almost got a 6 or 7 in a line here, and there's too much space on the edge of the area for the two midfielders to have opportunities. That is Tottenham's biggest weakness so far in the defensive structure that I think Man City will look to exploit. If you start dropping Sarr too deep into the box with Palhinha and Bentancur, you're never going to get out of the box, and City are going to have too much joy, especially because Gonzalez is going to be up here as well. I don't see how we're going to get the ball up to Richarlison or Kudus to break effectively without having Sarr sort of in this position and Palhinha and Bentancur here. So that's one thing to keep an eye out from Spurs on a defensive point of view. Now, ignore the names on the City lineup for now. I'm going to get into that into the next section. But where I think Tottenham can exploit Man City when we're attacking is where Wolves actually had a bit of joy. I know it looks on paper that they got completely battered 4-0, but Wolves did have a lot of an attacking joy, and that was by stretching Man City's defence in on a counter-attack and in transition and peeling players out wide. And I think we're definitely going to have to take advantage of this. And this is where I think Porro and Kudus are going to be key in this scenario, because I still don't think we have the players on the left-hand side to do this. And that's its whole problem in itself, which is why we desperately need someone like Savinho. The right-hand side for Spurs is going to be absolutely key. To show you properly what I mean by Wolves having some success, I've got some screenshots here from the Wolves-Man City game. So this was pretty early on in the match. You've got Wolves here on the break. You can see the 4 of Man City here. You kind of can see Gonzalez in the middle here. And then you've got the 4 forwards with Haaland up top. So that was their shape. But where Wolves had a lot of joy was actually getting the ball out onto the right-hand side, where Aït-Nouri had to peel across. Because obviously Man City are a very attacking team, a lot of these players were committed forward. And this is something where I think Gonzalez still needs to learn the 6 role better. and which is why I'm praying that that Rodri is not fit enough to play, because I think he'd make a huge difference for them. I think he's a bit too tight to Aït-Nouri in this sort of situation here. There's a huge gap in this position here, but look how closely you've got Man City's defence. You've got Diaz, you've got Stones, and you've got Rico Lewis, all sort of in the middle, really close to try and close off the two Wolves attackers, but you've got a free man on the left-hand side here. It's just so disjointed in this position. You've got midfielders and everyone's trying to track back as much as they can, as quickly as they can. Gonzalez realistically should be over here covering this gap here. The ball comes into the box, and don't get me wrong, it's a great block from Stones, but Strand Larsen was able to have a shot off. You've still got a free man here in case anyone was there to pick up a second ball. They could have had another opportunity. It does come back out wide again. Okay, Gonzalez is now sort of sat in this position to sit in the 5. It's a little bit more solid. You've got the 5 and the 4, but the ball gets played back to Matt Doherty, I think this is, in this position, and it gets whipped in. Now, in this scenario, Menezes was offside. I think it was Menezes in this position. Menezes was offside, but with one ball whipped in from a position that Porro will absolutely love, they was able to get a header and score. Okay, it was offside, but it's just the opportunities that were being created by stretching Aït-Nouri as wide as possible, and Man City not having a crazy amount of players in the box and having people that can win headers in the box. They were able to get a goal in this scenario, so that's a bit promising for Spurs. Just don't stand offside. Another situation, passing out. I think this is Diaz. It's really hard to tell with his low quality screenshots, sorry about that, but I think this is Diaz on the ball, trying to play the ball through the middle. You can see obviously Rico Lewis is tucked in a little bit more to sort of help out and build up. And in fact, the press from Wolves was pretty good to win the ball back in this scenario from the midfielders on top of Reinders, to then start a quick, very quick counter-attack. It's just a really disjointed. Look how deep Stones is in this situation. Rico Lewis coming more central as well. So much space being created for Wolves to be able to attack. And in this situation, I think they sort of played the wrong way. I think this is the Bellegarde on the left-hand side it ends up coming to. I'd like to think maybe if it was Spurs, we'd be able to create a better opportunity. I think he makes the wrong decision in this scenario and tries to shoot into crowded areas. But look at Man City's shape, that you can take advantage of this. Is this Hover on the left, or Wolf on the left-hand side? Has so much space if he was able to play a little reverse pass into him and an attack play to the back post. Again, there's another offside scenario where they had a shot from this, but it's this from Man City that I think we can really take advantage of, because I do think we have better quality than Wolves. And it just kept on happening with more opportunities. Again, on the right-hand side, a ball was played along the line, and all you had to do was stretch their defence, who initially start quite close-knit because they're trying to drive through the midfield in Man City's attack. But if you do win the ball back, go out wide. Go out wide as far as possible. Bring Aït-Nouri out of play to leave just 3 Man City players in the middle, because you've got all of the midfielders trying to run back as quickly as they can. A ball got played through, into the box. Strand Larsen had another shot that just went narrowly wide. But look at this. There's no shape to Man City defending in the box. And you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 Wolves players in there, 2 with complete open space. And this happened in a lot of Wolves' chances throughout this match. So as much as Man City were phenomenal going forward, they can be got at with just getting them out wide and across into the box, which is something I think Spurs will be really, really good at. Another opportunity, winning the ball high up the pitch. Obviously, John Stones is just showing as an option, but the ball gets won back by Wolves. They managed to cut the ball back into Strand Larsen. Now again, trying to cut off the pass to number 28 in the middle, fair enough, but you've got 1, 2... on the edge of the area. This is I guess the slight problem with having to commit the likes of Bernardo Silva and Reinders. But when you're committing so many men forward like Man City will, and like Spurs did under Ange, you're going to have spaces on the edge of the area, especially if you can stretch the defence like a lot of teams did against us last season. Okay, Strand Larsen has a shot. Strikers are going to shoot, but you've got the opportunity to be able to lay off to 3 players on the edge of the box. And this one was a good save from Trafford as well. Basically, what I'm just trying to get at, as amazing as Man City are going forward, they still have some defensive structural issues, which we can take advantage of in transition. How are we going to do that? Well, like I said, the key is going to be our right-hand side as well, just like Wolves were trying to do throughout that match. Kudus, Porro, whether it's Richarlison or Solanke are going to have to be in the box waiting. Think what we're going to need to do, especially with Sarr getting involved as well, is get the ball to either Kudus or Porro on the right-hand side. Let's say we get it out to Kudus. I know he's going to get pulled out wide. Gvardiol, Stones, and whether it's or whoever the defense may be, they're going to be quite narrow in this midfield. That's where we're going to need Richarlison and Sarr to sort of crash the box as well. You're going to have the likes of Bentancur, Pellegrini, probably going to be in these sort of positions here. What I liked about Spurs against PSG is actually when we were going forward, Porro was very, very high up the pitch. Danzo almost became a right back for a lot of our attacks, and we sort of set up in this four at the back shape going forward. Kudos to cross into either Richarlison, Solanke, Sarr, or if anything, get the ball back to Porro like Doherty had with some joy, and get that ball whipped in to the likes of Sarr and Solanke in the box. And look, with the back line the way it is as well, you could even commit Spence a bit further forward in this sort of scenario. You've got Van der Ven, Romero, Danzo sort of forming this back three. 3-2-5. That is how we like to attack in a lot of games. I think this is where we're going to have to hurt City the most. I think this is how I would set up against Man City. But what will Pep do and tweak from Wolves? Because we all know it's not the same team every week with Pep, which is why I've gone for the likes of Gvardiol, why I've gone for Marmoush, and why I've gone for Nunes in this team. This is just my little prediction as to what might happen. Now, what I'm assuming is Rodri is still not fit to go back into the midfield. I think he'll keep the midfield the same just because of how great they were against Wolves at creating opportunities. I think Gvardiol, he wasn't fit for last week, and I think Diaz was off of it slightly. I think Stones was brilliant, so I'm likely to see a Stones-Gvardiol partnership. Rico Lewis was brilliant. I do think, however, because of the fact that they were coming in centrally and sort of setting up in this 2-3-5 formation, I think Pep, to counter-attack how physical we're going to be, Pep's going to want to match the physicality as well. And I think Nunes does bring that over Rico Lewis. And I think he's just going to want someone that's a little bit more physical, who can still do the same job of propping up as an 8 when needed to, or even holding some width if Bob came centrally. Ederson is, to be honest, it's a 50-50. I just read up on Man City's Twitter. A lot of them are expecting Ederson to start because I don't think his move to Galatasaray has formed just yet. I could be wrong. That could easily just be Trafford. I have a sneaking suspicion that he's going to play Marmoush in this match instead of Doku. I think Doku was completely isolated, and I think he's going to want someone like Marmoush to help press with Haaland because of our back five. Even though what we spoke about earlier, and again this sort of plays into why I think Nunes would play instead of Rico Lewis, we saw Ait-Nouri invert a lot. We saw Lewis, and just pretend this is Lewis, we saw Lewis invert a lot in the match. That's because we wanted Doku to hold, to hold the width throughout the match. Same with Bob on this side. Where I can see Pep tweaking his tactics ever so slightly is by starting Marmoush. He will come a lot more central to help Haaland press against us. I can see, especially because Gvardiol will be back in the team, in my opinion, I can see Ait-Nouri going back to holding more width again when going forward, which means I can see Gvardiol almost sort of going as a left centre-back almost. Look, if they go for a 2-3, I think it'll be like this. I think Nunes will be the one inverting, and maybe Bernardo Silva will drop a little bit deeper to help out with Gonzalez, and then you've got sort of Reinders, Haaland, Marmoush, Ait-Nouri, Bob. If they're to build up in a 2-3-5 shape, I think this is what Pep is going to opt for City against Spurs, mainly because I think he's going to want Marmoush's central pressing to help out and combat against our three very, very physical defenders. I just don't think Doku is the man for that scenario. I think as well, because we will want to commit Porro forward, and because we will want to commit Kudus forward, I do think he's going to opt more for Ait-Nouri to be out wide. That's just my opinion. Or equally, even if they want to make sure that they're not getting caught in the transitions as much, because it was a danger for Wolves, simply just shift Nunes along, and it's just a 3-2-5 shape instead of a 2-3-5. I think something like that would benefit Nunes more than it would Rico Lewis, which is why I think this is how I see sort of Man City lining up. Look, if Foden's fit, there is a way to get Foden in the team as well, because Foden always plays really well against Spurs. But in my mind, as of right now, I think this is the slight tweak that Pep will make to sort of counter attack, I guess, or counterbalance Spurs going in this sort of really defensive, strong structure compared to what Wolves were doing. So there you have it. That was Man City against Wolves, how I think they're going to set up against Spurs, and how I think Spurs will set up against Man City to try and counteract Man City's aggressive attacking style of play, and what we can do to beat them on Saturday. If you like this sort of tactical breakdown, please make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys for the tactical breakdown after the game, where hopefully I'm saying this was the tactical genius from Thomas Frank and how they managed to beat Man City 2-0. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.